you very much. Well, in this first brief presentation, I want to very much build on the excellent plenary discussion that we had in the last session in the auditorium to outline why innovation, we believe, is so key to meeting the sustainable development challenges that we're facing, and to offer some guiding principles for what I want to suggest is a much needed transformative approach to thinking about innovation and indeed about technology and its contribution to sustainable development more broadly. So the context is something we've been hearing about a great deal, and particularly this morning. It's more urgent than ever. We're seeing the existence of dynamic global planetary boundaries, some of which are already breached, others approaching fast, science having clarified those in an unprecedented way. Navigating within what's being called a safe operating space for humanity is critical, yet given ongoing challenges of poverty and inequity, promoting well-being, justice, poverty reduction is more crucial than ever too. Now, planetary boundaries are not static limits and shouldn't be confused with them. But as part of the introduction to this session, I think there are some instructive comparisons to be made with debates 40 years ago, not 20 years ago, but 40 years ago, around so-called limits to growth. And then, as I'm sure most of you are aware, the World 3 model of Meadows et al. Predicted, again, catastrophe as trends in population growth and resource use ran up against what then were being seen as very finite limits in Earth's capacity. And at the time, two different and thorough critiques and modelling responses were pretty influential and helped set the scene for, I think, what we want to argue in this session. In the first, Amilcar Herrera and colleagues, in a project based in Argentina at the Fundación Bariloche, funded by IDRC, pointed out that the limits model left economic and political and social organisation and trends entirely unquestioned. They produced an alternative Latin American world model, as they called it, which took a very different starting point, an explicitly values-based vision of a desirable societal future. And they then worked back to show how this could actually be achieved in material terms, using proven human creativity, but also requiring transformation in institutional and economic organisation and relations of power. In effect, at this time, 40 years ago, and coming from Latin America, this was a normative vision about the futures we want. And that future was a future of reduced poverty and misery and of equality and justice. Now, that's very much what we were talking about in the earlier plenary today. Futures we want. Meanwhile, at SPRU, one of the STEP Centre's institutions in the UK, Chris Freeman, Mary Jahoda and others critiqued limits to growth for underplaying the potential of technology and innovation, in actually sometimes overcoming these finite limits and offering novel ways to steer within them. Now, fast forward to 2012, and these emphases on innovation and on desired futures are more important than ever. And I would suggest that we now need transforming innovation, and that's the title of the document that Adrian referred to, in two senses. Firstly, innovation that can transform, that can help to bring about this paradigm shift, enabling human societies to navigate safely. But also, to do that, transformation in modes of innovation, away from business as usual. And as this little diagram summarises, innovation involves new ways of doing things, and those can involve technologies, but it's beyond just technologies. It's also about the social and institutional practices connected to them. Innovations are part of pathways. Some of them are unsustainable. They're the grey pointers on this diagram. They're moving us outside a safe operating space. Fossil-fueled energy pathways would be a clear example. But some offer prospects of keeping us within a safe operating space and moving us towards desired societal futures, moving us along these directions. Remembering Kate Rayworth's presentation earlier, you could see this as a little quarter of the donut between these bluey-greeny lines here. But even amongst these pathways and directions, there are many alternatives which have different distributional outcomes. So I'm going to suggest in a minute that we need to transform the way we think about innovation and perform it quite fundamentally to take these 3 Ds of direction, diversity and distribution far more seriously, and I want to elaborate on what that means. But we also need to appreciate another theme that came up this morning, the multi-scale nature of sustainable development challenges. The emphasis on global planetary boundaries and challenges can and often does suggest that the answer for technology lies in large-scale technological fixes coupled to top-down policy proposals, whereby advanced science and engineering are harnessed towards solutions that can be rolled out at scale, whether in biotechnology to feed 9 billion people through advanced high-yielding crops, for instance, or geoengineering and low-carbon technologies to mitigate climate change. They may have a role, but I think as we've seen over the last couple of decades, such top-down approaches have often missed their mark. And more crucially, they've remained separate from the vast array of innovative grassroots initiatives that have been springing up in farms and forests, in villages and municipalities, in factories and homes across the globe. These are the kinds of local development that were emphasised in Local Agenda 21 in Rio 1992, that Camilla Toulmin talked about this morning in local development. They've often flourished. They draw on people's own vibrant forms of knowledge, technology and experimentation. But too often they've remained at the margins. We're now very well aware that we're living in a highly globalised world where challenges are multi-scale, and there's a new urgency to connect these 2 strands of sustainable development, embracing local action, absolutely, in multi-scale approaches. So, in harnessing innovation to meet these multi-scale sustainable development challenges then, we suggest that direction, distribution and diversity, 3 Ds, offer some key principles. Why is this? Well, taking direction seriously means clarity on the particular goals driving innovation. Too often we hear arguments that innovation is about growth or progress, but we need to ask what kinds of growth, what kinds of progress? Is it navigating along the kind of compass that we need? So directions mean active steering within a safe operating space towards desired futures, away from evidently unsustainable pathways. Direction also means staying on track amidst turbulence, and that can mean innovations in responding and adapting to highly dynamic social and ecological systems. And there are key roles, we would suggest, for grassroots innovations in steering these directions. As we see here, just one amongst hundreds and thousands and millions of examples one could draw upon. This is seed selectors in Kenya who are enacting an established informal practice whereby farmers select their own seed on the basis of its performance each season, drawing on traditional knowledge and skills to produce both cheaper, more diverse seeds and to respond to changing conditions in an ongoing and dynamic way. The second D is diversity, something that Camilla referred to this morning in her very nice analogy of multiple pipes and that lovely slide. Because even around any given sustainability challenge, take something like meeting food security needs amidst drought or low carbon energy, nurturing more diverse approaches and forms of innovation can help some really crucial things. It can help resist powerful processes of locking to pathways that are unsustainable. It can help to accommodate a plurality of values and contexts. Singular policy and technological solutions, even if they're pointing in sustainable directions that might seem optimal from a global perspective, are rarely going to prove desirable or even feasible in all localities. Different cultural and ecological settings are inevitably going to require contrasting approaches. So, for instance, coming back to Kenya, high-tech innovations to enhance maize productivity might well suit certain of the country's better watered, higher agricultural potential ecological zones, but they will fail amidst the social and ecological realities of many of its poorer and drier regions. Diversity also allows us, importantly, to respond to uncertainty and surprise, keeping options open in a way that avoids the risks associated with putting all our eggs in one basket and then finding that that basket has got some holes in. So we wish we'd had a whole range of baskets. And finally, diversity also breeds diversity. In a way, one can imagine a multiplication of branching paths whereby diverse innovations foster further innovations, responding again to dynamic contexts. And our third D is distribution, and this is really critical in a world where poverty reduction and social justice must lie at the heart of sustainable development. Distribution means taking seriously how the safe operating space is shared between different people, but directly thinking about innovation, it means asking about who gains or loses from particular kinds of technology and policy. And there are, as we've heard again this morning, often trade-offs at stake, even between contrasting goals and innovations that may seem to be about sustainability. So, for instance, large-scale irrigated land developments in East Africa may well contribute to sustainable development from the perspective of national food security or more efficient use of scarce land and water resources. But they also may be locally experienced by women farmers or by pastoralists as land and water grabs that are actually displacing people and undermining their livelihoods in quite fundamental ways. Take something else. In Brazil here, we're seeing a lot of emphasis on hydro dams as a pathway towards sustainable energy, but they raise similar distributional issues. So steering policy and innovation requires keeping distributional issues really centre stage, not just in achieving some kind of trickle down to the grassroots and the poor, but in shaping and thinking about directions. And here again we would suggest grassroots innovations and favouring those offer particular value because they help to prioritise more fairly the interests and the perspectives of more marginal groups. Sorry, I'm not managing this very much. So, to move to conclude, in all of this, it becomes clear that innovation, thinking about innovation, is not simply a technical matter. It is fundamentally about socio-political and justice questions to bear, and political questions about how choices are made, what to innovate around, and how to allocate resources in relation to what values. And this kind of 3D analysis and set of principles, we suggest, might be rather helpful as a basis for guiding decision makers as they grapple with this kind of choice and challenge in their own particular settings. And the challenges are many and they're very practical. One could imagine a Kenyan agricultural minister or a Peruvian energy minister, to pick up on some of the examples I've used, considering the 3D implications of allocating scarce resources to different kinds of research, or deciding regulatory policy, or investing in particular kinds of infrastructures. At the same time, though, fostering networks, and particularly bottom-up networks, is going to be crucial in enabling grassroots innovations, some of those that can actually enact these 3Ds in practice, to flourish. And networks and brokers, people who have the capacity to track these macro-level trends, including planetary boundaries, and understandings at the local level and the grassroots, are needed to try and connect the local and the global in more imaginative and ultimately more successful ways. But finally, to bring this about, a fourth principle, a fourth D, if you like, is also key. I think we need to think about democratic institutions and processes, which are going to be crucial in a practical way to enable the kind of inclusive debate about the politics of direction and distribution and diversity across multiple scales that will be needed to navigate these sustainability challenges. But to go back to Amilcar Herrera and others, and some of the debates that have gone on in Brazil that he and colleagues helped to pioneer since, democratic inclusive debate also carries normative value. It is surely part of the just, egalitarian, inclusive futures that many of us at least want and are trying to struggle for here in Rio and beyond. Thank you.